Morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Adam Brazendale, Senior Mental Health Trainer, and I'm delighted to be here to deliver this free webinar brought to you by PAM Wellness. And today we're going to explore mental health and resilience and share practical strategies to manage stress, maintain well-being, and thrive through challenges. Now, just a bit of information to pass on to you before we get started. The webinar itself is a free high-level taster session of our training and workshops. The session covers some of our training around how to support mental well-being in the workplace. Now, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A chat throughout the webinar, and we'll do our very best to answer as many of those as we can at the end of the session. The session itself is being recorded, and the video will be of this attached to our YouTube channel at the end of the session. It could take a little while for that to happen, so don't just expect it in the first few days, but we will get that uploaded as soon as we're able to, possibly. And if you'd like to discuss your training and workshop requirements, please contact us at the email address below, and we'll also provide details on available courses at the end of the session. So just a few bits of information to pass on to you again. In this first part, we're going to explore mental health and resilience and take a snapshot of UK statistics around today's topic. We'll briefly look at how mental health sits on a continuum, then examine what stress is, an umbrella term to describe a range of cognitive, emotional, physical, and behavioural reactions. And then finally, in this part, we'll also look at what resilience is and is not. So before we look at the concepts of mental health resilience, just want to start by giving you a snapshot of their prevalence and impact of mental health issues here in the UK. 1 in 4 adults experience a mental health problem each year. This relates to adults in England who report experiencing a diagnosable mental health condition over a 12-month period. 1 in 5 people report a common mental health issue weekly. These issues typically include anxiety and depression and come from population level surveys monitoring the emotional well-being of the nation. Now, it's important to acknowledge that those two prevalence figures relate to the general population. But when we look more specifically at the working population, the picture becomes even more striking. 964,000 workers reported work-related stress, depression or anxiety in 2024-25. This is based on the latest health and safety executive data, reflecting employees who attribute their mental health difficulties directly to their job or workplace conditions. 40.1 million working days were lost in 2024-25. This figure refers to all working days lost to work-related ill health and injury, with stress, anxiety and depression consistently being the leading causes of absence. And poor mental health costs UK employers around £51 billion annually. This includes the combined impact of absenteeism, presenteeism, being at work but functioning below capacity, and staff turnover linked to mental health. Now, of course, these numbers only represent what is reported. Many people, particularly men, continue to underreport mental health difficulties for a variety of personal, cultural, or workplace reasons. So even these large figures are likely only to be an estimate. But what is clear from the data is that despite the huge amount of national and international effort going into improving mental health and well-being, we still have a significant way to go. And that's why understanding these concepts, building resilience, matters so much. So let's first look at that term mental health. And what comes to mind when you hear that phrase? Now, there is a poll, which I'm going to launch for you just now. And in there, I'd like you to think about what comes to mind when you hear that term mental health. Put your thoughts in the poll there. What comes to mind when you hear that term mental health? Let's have a look at what people put in there. So lots of different words coming up. Feeling of well-being, struggling, anxiety, depression, stress. Okay, so we all have different ways of interpreting mental health. For some people, mental health immediately brings up thoughts of diagnosable conditions like anxiety or depression. For others, it's more about daily pressures, stress, demands, expectations, all of which can influence how we think, feel, and cope. And for many, the term also includes the positive aspects of well-being, such as resilience, strength, confidence, or emotional balance. Now, I've asked nearly, how many of you here now? 640 people to define mental health, and I've probably got as many different answers. That's because we all bring our own experiences, perspectives, and assumptions to the table. Now, some people think of mental health purely in terms of illness, crisis, while others see it as something we all have, just like physical health, shifting up and down depending on what's happening in our lives. So thank you very much, everyone, for your thought in the poll there. And what is also interesting is that researchers have also found it challenging to fully pin down a single definition of mental health. And there's many different definitions out there, but the most commonly cited one is this one on the screen from the World Health Organization, which describes mental health as a state of well-being in which the individual realizes their own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to their community. Now, this is a helpful starting point because it highlights key areas of functioning. But even this definition has limitations. For example, what counts as normal stresses? Or what is considered coping? And that's going to vary hugely between cultures, communities, even individuals. I'm sure even the teams that you work with will have different definitions. And it also raises questions. If someone isn't fully meeting every one of those criteria, does that automatically mean they have poor mental health? Probably not. Now, this lack of a universal agreement shows why defining mental health can be so complex and why it matters that we approach this topic with nuance. With that in mind, and to make this topic easier to conceptualize today, we're going to look at a research-based model that helps us to understand that mental health and ill health exist on a continuum rather than this either or state. What we're showing here on the screen is the mental health continuum. This was developed by a researcher back in the early 2000s called Keyes. It's grounded in research. It's a really popular model to understand the human experience of mental health. Now, what the continuum aims to encompass are the different aspects of how mental health and mental illness can be experienced, but also acknowledges how mental health is not static. Now, as you can see from the model on the screen, there are four fundamental aspects that characterize different presentations. Of course, there's so many more different presentations. We haven't got the time to go through all of them here today. These are the fundamental ones, however. The horizontal axis indicates mental illness, and it ranges from serious mental illness symptoms here on the left, all the way through to no mental illness symptoms on the right. And the vertical axis indicates mental health, and that ranges from optimum mental health, where someone's flourishing with their mental health at the top, all the way down to poor mental health, where it's languishing at the bottom. Now, again, the main point of the model is to illustrate that our mental health exists on a continuum, that it can vary across an individual's lifespan and be influenced by a range of factors. So I'm going to go through these different aspects today, and I'd like to think about whereabouts are you on the mental health continuum, about 12 minutes past 11 on the 19th of January 2026, and what a different aspect been applicable a week ago, a month ago, or even a year ago. Let's have a look. So we're going to start in this top left-hand corner. I'm going to go clockwise. And what we're showing here is optimum mental health with mental illness. So someone with mental illness can be mentally healthy, have a sense of purpose, a positive self-concept, and take actions that support their mental health, not reduce it. So if they've been diagnosed with a mental health condition, say severe depression, and they're prescribed medication, they take it. They don't self-medicate with alcohol or recreational drugs. They've been invited to talk in therapies. They attend the sessions. They don't isolate themselves. In this part, we've got optimum mental health without mental illness. So this is a person who has a high level of mental well-being, positive self-concept, relationships with others, a sense of purpose, and no mental illness. But that doesn't mean that this person is immune to mental illness or mental health difficulties. Something can happen in that person's life that pushes the boundaries of their resilience to a point where they might develop symptoms of a mental illness, but because of their resilience levels, maybe be able to bounce back. Bottom right hand corner, poor mental health without mental illness. Someone can have poor mental health without a diagnosable mental illness, but they might have low levels of mental well-being, such as feelings of emptiness, stagnation. They might be socially isolating themselves. They may be doing their things that put their mental health at risk of developing a mental illness, like drinking too much alcohol, taking recreational drugs, etc. And if something was to happen in their lives, it could push any boundaries of their resilience to a point where they might develop symptoms of a mental illness and end up here, poor mental health with mental illness. So this is a person who has a diagnosable mental illness and low levels of mental well-being, such as low self-esteem, inability to perform important roles like working, and take actions that reduce their mental well-being, not improve it. Now, as a therapist, I believe we all have the necessity to improve our mental health. I wouldn't do my role if that wasn't the case. So somebody with poor mental health with mental illness was to take steps to improve their mental health. They could end up here with optimum mental health with mental illness. And as we know, not all mental illnesses are long, severe, enduring. They could even end up here with optimum mental health without mental illness. So now that we've looked at the mental health continuum, maybe again think about whereabouts are you on it today, and would a different aspect been applicable a week ago, a month ago, or even a year ago? Now, we can see from the continuum that mental health isn't something fixed or binary. It's not a case of either being well or unwell. Instead, we move up and down, side to side, back and forth. And that continuum will change throughout our lives. And sometimes even throughout the same week, depending on what's happening on around us, socially, occupationally. And one of the biggest things that influences where we sit on the continuum at any given moment is stress. And stress is often a starting point, an early signal that our emotional or psychological health is being impacted. Now, stress itself isn't automatically a bad thing. We all experience stress, and sometimes it can even be motivating. But when the pressures, when the demands we're facing start to outweigh the resource we have to cope, that's when stress can begin to pull us down the continuum to poor mental well-being. So before we look at resilience, it's important we take a moment to understand what we really mean by stress, because people use the term in lots of different ways. Now, stress is actually an umbrella term that encompasses a whole range of cognitive, emotional, physical, and behavioural responses. And understanding these responses is crucial for spotting the early signs, both in ourselves and in others that we work with. So with that in mind, let's take a close look at what stress is and how it shows up in our body and mind. Now on this slide, you'll see a range of common stress warning signs and symptoms grouped into four areas: cognitively, emotionally, physically, and behaviorally. And these can help us recognize just how widely stress can show up across those different areas. For example, cognitively, people might notice memory problems, difficulty concentrating or racing thoughts. Emotionally, stress can show up as irritability, low mood, or feeling overwhelmed. Physically, it can include a range of symptoms like headaches, muscle tension, digestive issues, or changes in heart rate. And behaviorally, signs might include withdrawing from others, changes in sleep, appetite, or relying on more like substances like alcohol, even recreational drugs to cope. Now, it is really important that we take time to check in and pay attention to these early signs, both in ourselves and again, colleagues, people that we work with. Stress reactions like these, if left unmanaged, can precede the development of more significant mental health difficulties, such as anxiety or depression. That said, experiencing stress or anxious feelings doesn't automatically mean someone has or will develop a clinical anxiety disorder. For a diagnosis, symptoms would need to be persistent and disproportionate to the level of threat or pressure someone is facing. And in everyday life, these signs are often simple indicators that our emotional load is increasing, that we might need support, rest, or a change of pace. And in recent years, many factors such as the cost of living crisis, changes in work patterns, economic uncertainty, and global events have all contributed to rising stress levels across many people in the UK. In fact, many people report feeling constantly switched on, more pressures, or less able to recharge than before. So being able to spot these early stress indicators is more important now than ever. Now, next, we're going to begin thinking about how resilience fits into this picture. What helps us buffer these pressures and bounce back during challenging periods? So now we've explored stress and how it affects us, it's important to turn our attention towards something equally significant: resilience. Now, on this slide, you'll see a couple of common definitions. The dictionary defines resilience as the ability of people, things to recover quickly after something unpleasant, such as a shock, injury, etc. And another widely used description talks about resilience as the ability to prepare for, cope with, or adapt during times of stress or adversity. Now, I really like this definition because it looks at those three areas. It's about preparing for, coping with in the moment, but also adapting to things that can be demanding, like changes, etc. Now, these are useful starting points to describe resilience, but modern understandings of resilience go much further. Mind, who are one of the leading mental health charities here in the UK, for example, emphasise that resilience isn't just about bouncing back, but also how well we adapt in the face of challenging circumstances whilst maintaining a stable and mental well-being. Crucially, resilience isn't a personality trait. It's not something you have or don't have. It's a learned process, a combination of behaviours, thoughts, habits, and skills that we can strengthen over time. And people with high resilience often show a more flexible mindset. They're better able to regain balance after setbacks, and they tend to maintain healthier routines and coping strategies even when stress levels rise. And again, not turn to things like alcohol, etc. And when we talked about resilience, it's also important to clear up some common misunderstandings. For example, resilience isn't about being unaffected by challenges or pretending everything's fine. It's not a fixed trait or something that people are born with. And it's definitely not about being blindly optimistic, Pollyanna about life, or looking through rose-tinted glasses. Resilience simply means being able to adapt, recover, and continue function despite stress or difficulties. And we all experience challenging moments. Resilience is the process that helps us cope, move forward, not avoid the stress altogether. And the important thing is resilience can be strengthened against stressors, no matter where we're starting from. Anyone can increase it. So next, let's look at how we can begin developing those skills. Now, so far, we've talked about the foundations of mental health and resilience. We've looked at the current picture of mental health statistics here in the UK. We've also explored the idea that mental health exists on a continuum. We looked at stress, what it is, how it shows up in our thoughts, emotions, body, etc., and why recognizing the early signs is so important. And then we've just explored resilience, what it means, how it helps us cope with challenges, and importantly, what it's not. Now, with that in place, we're now going to look at how we can all build, strengthen our resilience in everyday life, no matter where we're starting from. On this slide, you'll see the PERMA model devised by Dr. Martin Siegelman. In 1998, at his inaugural speech as the new president of the American Psychological Association, Siegelman moved the emphasis away from pathology and mental illness towards the study of positive and constructive aspects of life. Since then, many theories, models have focused on positive psychology interventions that contribute to a life worth living, as well as the definition, measurement, and creation of well-being. Now, back in 2011, 2012, Siegelman chose 5 elements that people inherently pursue because they're motivated and they can enhance well-being in order to construct a hypothesis to address this. And the PERMA model suggests that building resilience involves organizing ourselves and being willing to adapt to new ways of being. So the 5 elements that he chose were positive emotions, which is the P, engaging in things that we enjoy, which is the E, positive relationships, which is the R, meaning, which is the M, and accomplishment, which is the A. Now, the plus in the PermaPlus model represents physical activity, sleep, nutrition, and optimism, and they work in tandem with our psychological well-being. So let's have a look at these in just a little bit more depth for you today. And the first, positive emotions. Positive emotions give us emotional fuel. Small moments of gratitude or joy help us to stay balanced and resilient. Now, a question we can ask ourselves to focus on this could be, when was the last time I practiced gratitude for something I have in my life? Engagement is about being absorbed in what we're doing, switched on into the here and now, and switched off from stressors, and it allows us to recharge. And a question we can ask ourselves to keep engaged could be, what percentage of my time do I spend in the present moment, the here and the now? The R in the PERMA model is relationships, and connection strengthens relationships. Supportive relationships help us feel grounded, less alone when challenges arise. So maybe ask yourself a question: to what extent am I doing things today that are valuable and worthwhile to me? Meaning gives us purpose. When we feel what we do matters, we can cope better with stress, adversities. A question we can ask ourselves here is, am I using my passions, my abilities, my skills to support me and others? An accomplishment builds confidence. Noticing progress, even small wins, help and strengthens resilience. Now, it doesn't mean that everything has to be successful. Even with a positive mindset, we can look at mistakes as a way to grow, learn. And a question we can ask ourselves here is, what do I enjoy doing just for the sake of it? Now, another key element that helps us build resilience is self-care. You've probably heard of the term before, and at its core, self-care simply means taking time to look after yourself, to rest, recharge, do things that you enjoy. Now, you'll notice that works really closely with the elements of the PERMA model that we just looked at earlier, particularly positive emotions, engagement, relationships, and meaning. Now, really important to emphasize is that self-care is subjective. It's going to be different for everyone. And it doesn't need to be a big activity or something formal. But what self-care is not is putting pressure on yourself to do the things you think you should be doing. It's not another item on your to-do list, one that becomes one more task to do. What it is doing what fulfills you or nourishing for you at that time. Small things integrated into everyday life, allowing yourself a moment to pause, rest, enjoy. Now, one of the biggest barriers I come across as a therapist for self-care is time. So rather than seeing self-care as another responsibility, think about how it can be brought naturally into your routine, daily activities. Just taking your break at work, having a quiet cup of tea, stepping outside for fresh air, or even just taking a shower and having your breakfast. I'd just like you to think about, what does self-care look like for you today? Consider it as a roof supported by 6 pillars of resilience. If any of those pillars are missing, our roof's going to tipple one way, topple the other, or come crashing through. So think about an area that you might need to focus on today. Do you focus on one area and neglect the others? And those boxes there in blue, just some suggestions that we've thought about that could help you to improve some of those different areas. Again, they're not mandatory. What works for one person might not for another. And to expand on this, you could also look at self-care in the terms of relaxation, mindfulness, using apps like the PAM Wellness Champion Health app to develop mindfulness and practice self-kindness. Doing activities, hobbies that keep your attention focused, help prevent rumination. Maybe scheduling time to connect with friends and family, even a 10-minute call or just sending a quick text message. Making sure you've got balance in your life, recognizing when work becomes a refuge or when it dominates. Creating balance, even if you live alone or work is your main focus, is important. And being assertive can help you with keeping your self-care boundaries in place, both at home and at work. Saying no when needed. Maintaining a bedtime routine, reducing screen time and winding down properly. Maybe separating what's within your control from what isn't and refocusing attention where it counts. And being kind to yourself, recognizing you may be carrying more than usual and giving yourself permission to rest. Okay, so just to summarize this free taster webinar today, mental health exists on a continuum. It's not a fixed on-off state. Stress is normal. Resilience can be built. It's not just something that is a trait given to some and not others. And there are many potential strategies that as individuals we can do to improve our mental well-being and increase our resilience. Now, as I mentioned before, this is just a taster session of some of the workshops that we do on mental health and resilience. Many more that we offer include mental health awareness, men's mental health, our trauma training series, practicing resilience and self-care, and many, many more. So if you and your teams are looking for training sessions, workshops that you feel could be beneficial, please do let us know and we'd be delighted to help. with maybe even either giving you some of our off the shelf subject matters that we do, or we can even look at bespoke sessions as well. And as I mentioned before, this has been recorded. Today's session recordings will be uploaded to our YouTube channel in the coming week. And again, there's a link there where you can access this. And finally, again, if you do would like to talk to us about your training and wellbeing needs, you can email us at businesssupport@pamwellbeing.co.uk or call us on 01925 976 111 and we'll be delighted to help.